It was a cold autumn evening when the world of Alexander Cole shattered forever. Cole was not just any man. He was a billionaire, one of those names whispered with awe in the business world. His empire stretched across real estate, finance, and technology. To the public, he was the definition of power and success. Private jets, charity galas, magazine covers, and interviews where he appeared invincible. But beneath the polished exterior of tailored suits and luxury penthouses lay a wound that never healed, a loss that money could never fix. 9 years earlier, his daughter, Emily, vanished. She was just 7 years old at the time, full of energy, with curly brown hair and a smile that melted every heart in a room. For Alexander, Emily wasn't just his only child. She was his entire world. His marriage had fallen apart years earlier, and Emily was his anchor, the one thing he treasured above all the millions in his bank accounts. That September day started like any other. Emily had been playing in the garden of her grandmother's house. It was supposed to be safe, family, neighbors, the quiet suburb where no one locked their doors. But within minutes, she was gone. The police were called. Sirens blared. Officers combed the neighborhood, knocking on doors, questioning strangers, searching cars, even draining a pond a mile away. News reporters flooded the street, their cameras flashing as Alexander begged for answers. "Please," he said to the microphones, his voice breaking. "She's just a little girl. Bring her back to me." But days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Flyers with Emily's face were plastered on every telephone pole, every bus stop, every supermarket board. Leads came in, but none led to her. Some were cruel hoaxes, others were dead ends. The search stretched across states, involving private investigators and FBI agents. And yet, there was nothing. Emily had vanished without a trace. The media frenzy was relentless. Talk shows debated whether she'd been abducted, whether she had wandered off, or whether something even darker had happened. For a while, the story was everywhere. Strangers lit candles and held vigils. Volunteers formed search parties. But as months slipped into years, public attention faded. The cameras left. The news cycle moved on. But Alexander never did. He poured millions into the search, hiring detectives, buying airtime, creating tip hotlines. He swore he would never give up. But with every passing year, hope thinned. Eventually, people stopped asking. Friends avoided the subject. Employees tiptoed around his grief. Even the investigators grew quiet. For 9 years, the case of Emily Cole remained one of those haunting mysteries. Unsolved, unclosed, unfinished. Alexander tried to move forward, but he never truly could. Every little girl he passed on the street made his chest tighten. Every missing child poster he saw on airports tore at his soul. He avoided birthdays, anniversaries, holidays, anything that reminded him of what was missing. He told himself she was alive. Somewhere. Somehow. That belief was the only thing that kept him sane. By the time Alexander entered his 50s, his wealth had only grown, but so had his loneliness. The billionaire who could buy anything, yachts, diamonds, entire companies, could not buy the one thing he wanted most, his daughter back. And then, fate decided to intervene. On a chilly November night in the city, Alexander left a charity gala where he had just donated a staggering sum to support homeless shelters. Ironically, he had chosen that cause because he had always wondered what might have happened to Emily. Was she out there somewhere, hungry, cold, alone? Did she even remember him? As he stepped out of the black car waiting for him, adjusting his cashmere scarf against the wind, he noticed a girl sitting on the corner near the steps of the hotel. She was thin, wrapped in a worn coat, holding a cardboard sign with shaky handwriting, "Hungry. Please help." At first, he thought nothing of it. He'd seen countless people on the streets before. Tragic faces, empty eyes, casualties of a system that failed him. His bodyguard was already gesturing for him to move along. But something stopped him. The girl looked young, far too young to be living like this. Her hair was tangled, her face pale from the cold, but there was something in her expression that made him pause. Her eyes, they held a depth he couldn't place, a kind of sadness mixed with stubborn resilience. Against his usual habits, Alexander approached. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a thick wad of bills. far more than anyone would normally give, and handed them to her. The girl looked up, startled. For a brief second, their eyes locked, and in that moment, something stirred inside him. A flicker of recognition, a ghost from the past. He quickly brushed it aside. His mind was playing tricks on him, he told himself. He'd seen Emily's face in so many strangers over the years that it was practically a reflex. But as the car door closed behind him and the city lights blurred past the window, Alexander couldn't shake the feeling. He kept seeing those eyes. He kept hearing her soft, trembling "thank you." For the first time in years, Alexander felt something he hadn't dared to feel in a long time. Hope. For Emily Cole, life had not been kind. She didn't remember the day she disappeared the same way her father did. For him, it was a single, sharp memory of loss that never faded. For her, it was more like a broken mirror, shards of images and sounds, fractured pieces that never quite came together. A car, a stranger's hand, fear, and then silence. What she did remember was the years that followed. The constant movement, the unfamiliar houses, and the gnawing hunger that became her closest companion. Emily had been taken, though she never fully understood by whom or why. The adults who controlled her early years after her disappearance kept her hidden, moving her from place to place, teaching her to answer to different names. Sometimes she was Sarah, other times Anna, but never Emily. Eventually, as she grew older and harder to control, they let her go, or abandoned her, really. She was left to fend for herself in a city that didn't care if she lived or died. At first, she was terrified, but soon, survival became second nature. By the time she was 14, Emily knew how to find food in dumpsters, how to slip into a church basement when the weather turned brutal, how to keep her head low to avoid attention. She learned the unspoken rules of the street. Trust no one, sleep lightly, and never reveal too much. She rarely thought about family. Memories of her father were blurry, distant, like a dream she once had. Sometimes she wondered if he had even looked for her, or if he had forgotten. Other times, when she closed her eyes, she could almost feel the warmth of his hand holding hers. But hope was a dangerous thing for someone in her position, so she buried it. Still, there were moments she couldn't help herself. She remembered her name, Emily Cole, and whispered it to herself at night, as if saying it would keep her real identity alive. On the streets, she was just another homeless teenager, one of many. People passed her without a glance. Some gave coins, others shouted cruel words. To most, she was invisible. Until that night. It was freezing, the kind of cold that made every bone ache. Emily sat curled on the steps of a luxury hotel, holding her cardboard sign. She hadn't eaten in 2 days. Her stomach growled, but she kept her face still, her eyes lowered. Experience had taught her that pity worked better when you didn't look desperate. She heard laughter from inside the hotel as the glass doors swung open. Men in tuxedos and women in gowns poured out, their perfume lingering in the icy air. Emily didn't bother to look up. She knew from experience that rich people rarely stopped. But then footsteps approached, heavy, deliberate. She felt a shadow fall across her. When she lifted her eyes, she saw him. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a tailored coat that looked more expensive than anything she had ever touched. His face was weathered but strong, his hair graying at the temples. For a second, she thought he might ignore her like the rest. But instead, he reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a thick stack of bills, and placed it gently in her hand. Emily froze. No one had ever given her that much before. "Stay warm," the man said, his voice deep and strangely familiar. She looked up at him, and their eyes met. It was only a second, maybe less, but something shifted inside her. His gaze was intense, filled with a sadness she didn't understand. For a heartbeat, it felt like he knew her, like he could see through the dirt, the hunger, the years of struggle. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. He nodded, then turned away. Emily sat there long after he left, staring at the money in her hand. She should have felt relief, excitement even. That much cash meant food, warmth, maybe even a chance to find shelter for a while. But instead, she felt unsettled. Because when she looked into his eyes, something stirred. A memory. A flash of another time, another place. A man holding her hand in a garden, lifting her onto his shoulders, laughing with her. Could it be? No, it was impossible. Emily shook her head, trying to banish the thought. She had learned not to trust hope. Hope only led to disappointment. Still, she couldn't sleep that night. She lay in an abandoned building, clutching the money to her chest, replaying the moment over and over. Who was he? Why did his eyes feel so familiar? And why did her chest ache when she thought of him? Meanwhile, in the back seat of a sleek black car, Alexander Cole sat in silence, staring out the window as the city lights blurred by. He had given money to countless people over the years. But this was different. That girl, those eyes. There was something about her that he couldn't shake. He tried to dismiss it, to tell himself it was just his imagination, the wishful thinking of a father who had spent nearly a decade chasing ghosts. But deep down he knew, something about her had felt too right to ignore. By the time he returned home that night, Alexander's mind was racing. For the first time in years, he picked up the phone and called the private investigator who had once worked on Emily's case. His voice was steady, but his heart pounded as he gave instructions. "I needed to find someone," he said. "A girl on the streets. About 16 years old. Dark hair. Thin. Eyes that..." He paused, searching for words. Eyes that looked just like hers. He didn't dare say Emily's name. Not yet, because if he was wrong, it would break him all over again. But if he was right, if that girl really was his daughter, then the story of Emily Cole was far from over. For days, Alexander Cole couldn't get the girl out of his mind. The way she sat on the cold concrete steps, small and fragile, but carrying herself with quiet resilience. The way her eyes had caught the light. Eyes that mirrored his late wife's so perfectly, it sent a jolt of recognition straight through him. He had spent 9 years searching for his daughter, chasing every lead, pouring millions into private investigators, media appeals, and law enforcement cooperation. And every time, hope had been crushed. False sightings, dead ends, imposters pretending to be Emily for money. The heartbreak had been relentless, enough to make any man give up. But this time felt different. The very next morning, Alexander's team hit the streets. His longtime investigator, Frank Doyle, a grizzled former detective who had walked alongside him through the entire ordeal, led the search. They canvassed shelters, asked around food banks, showed photos to other homeless youth. It took 3 days before they found her. Emily was huddled beneath a bridge, her thin jacket pulled tightly around her shoulders, when Doyle approached with 2 other men in suits. She tensed immediately, ready to bolt. "Easy," Doyle said gently, raising his hands. "We're not here to hurt you. Someone wants to see you." Emily narrowed her eyes. "Who?" Doyle hesitated, then said softly, "Your father." The words cut through her like a knife. "My what?" "Your father. Alexander Cole. He thinks you might be his daughter." Emily's breath caught in her throat. The man from the hotel. The one with the sad eyes. Could be. But no, this was madness. She'd been alone for so long, abandoned, forgotten. Her father couldn't still be searching. He couldn't still care. "I think you've got the wrong person," she muttered, clutching her backpack. "Maybe," Doyle said calmly. "But if we're wrong, you'll walk away with some food, maybe a roof over your head for the night. And if we're right, well, then everything changes." Her stomach growled in betrayal. Against her instincts, she agreed. The reunion didn't happen immediately. Alexander insisted on a DNA test first. Not because he didn't believe, but because he couldn't afford to hope blindly again. The pain of a false positive, of another dead end, would be unbearable. Emily was taken to a discreet clinic. She sat in the sterile room, nerves fraying as a nurse swabbed the inside of her cheek. Alexander wasn't there, though she learned later he was pacing the lobby the entire time, unable to sit still. The wait was excruciating. For Emily, every hour was filled with questions. Could this really be her father? If so, why had it taken him so long? Why hadn't he found her sooner? And if not, if this was another cruel twist, what then? For Alexander, the nights were sleepless. He replayed their encounter again and again. The way she'd whispered, "Thank you." The uncanny resemblance in her features. He prayed, something he hadn't done in years, for the universe to give him back his child. Finally, the results came. Alexander sat in the doctor's office, his heart hammering. Doyle sat beside him, stone-faced but hopeful. Across the room, Emily perched on the edge of her chair, her arms crossed defensively. The doctor cleared his throat and unfolded the paper. "There's no easy way to say this," he began. "The probability of a biological relationship between Mr. Alexander Cole and Emily," he paused, his eyes lifting, "is 99.99%. She is your daughter." The room went silent. Alexander's breath caught. His hands trembled as tears filled his eyes. For the first time in nearly a decade, he allowed himself to feel what he had buried for so long: relief, joy, and overwhelming love. Emily's eyes widened, disbelief etched on her face. She wanted to argue, to deny it, but deep inside, something broke open. The memories came flooding back. Her father's laugh, the sound of his voice reading bedtime stories, the warmth of his embrace. "Emily," Alexander whispered, his voice shaking. "My God, it's you." Slowly, cautiously, he stood and stepped toward her. For a moment, she flinched. But then, as though instinct took over, she let him pull her into his arms. And for the first time in 9 years, father and daughter were whole again. The reunion made headlines within hours. "Missing billionaire heiress found alive after 9 years," screamed the tabloids. News crews swarmed the Cole estate, desperate for footage of Emily, the girl who had survived the streets only to be revealed as the long-lost daughter of one of the wealthiest men in the country. But behind the headlines, the road wasn't easy. Emily struggled to adjust. For years, she had lived hand-to-mouth, conditioned to expect hunger, fear, and betrayal. Now she was thrust into a world of luxury and cameras, strangers dissecting her every move. The mansion felt more like a museum than a home. At night, she still curled into a ball, afraid someone would rip it all away again. Alexander tried his best. He showered her with affection, gave her anything she asked for, tried to make up for lost time. But he also wrestled with guilt, guilt for not finding her sooner, guilt for the years she had suffered alone. Together, they began the long process of healing. But the story didn't end there. Investigators soon reopened Emily's missing person case. Questions demanded answers. Who had taken her? How had she ended up abandoned on the streets? Why had no one come forward in 9 years? Pieces slowly came together. Evidence pointed to a disgruntled former employee of the Cole estate, someone who had been fired for theft just weeks before Emily's disappearance. He had snatched her in a moment of vengeance, hoping for ransom. But when the Cole family refused to pay, without proof of life, the plan fell apart. Emily was shuffled through a network of criminals before being discarded. The man was eventually tracked down and arrested. But for Emily, the justice felt hollow. Nothing could give her back the childhood she had lost. And yet, as she stood beside her father at the press conference months later, she realized something powerful. She was no longer invisible, no longer forgotten, no longer alone. Her voice trembled as she addressed the cameras. "My name is Emily Cole. For 9 years, I was lost, but I survived, and now I'm home." The world watched in silence, many with tears in their eyes. For Alexander, it was the moment he had dreamed of, the proof that hope, even when buried, can bloom again. And for Emily, it was the beginning of a new story, one not defined by pain, but by resilience, reunion, and the unbreakable bond of family.